What up, wizards? It is Dev, SBMTG. We like it, a magic little bonus content for you today that nobody saw coming, least of all myself. But when I woke up today, I just really felt like making a video. And honestly, that's fortunate because we got one more day in this month. I've been playing a little bit too much Pokemon lately, and my AdSense looks terrible for the last 28 days. So let's get one more video out there. But at least it's one that I'm interested in making, and I think you'll be interested in too, because I have not really uttered a single word about Commander Masters yet. We haven't participated in spoiler season for this, but there are a bunch of brand new cards from this set that I'm actually really interested in. Of course, there's a bunch of reprints too, but we already know what those cards do. Why would we look at those? So instead, we're going to look at 10 of the 40 brand new cards in the set and talk about which of these new cards I'm sort of most excited to try out and play with. You know, I've been dipping my toe into Commander a little bit more lately, so some of these I am really excited to mess around with. So let's get into it, starting with what I guess we'll call number 10. It's Boon of the Spirit Realm. Boon's farm is 5 mana, 3 and 2 white for an enchantment with Constellation. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, it gets a blessing counter, and creatures you control get +1/+1 for each blessing counter on Boon. Brand new little card for the enchantment decks, and you know how much I love enchantments decks. Obviously, I've been messing around with Sithis Harvest Hand lately. I think it's a cool little budget commander for enchantments players and stuff, and I think this slots directly in, although the deck isn't necessarily budget if you do slot it in. I think this card's like $20 right now, but that's how all of the cards from Commander Masters are. I don't know if you're keyed into the prices of this set, but the singles are out of control. I might get a little kickback from TCG Player whenever you buy stuff through a link in the description or whatever, but I'm going to go ahead, just knowing that, full disclosure, I'm going to go ahead and recommend you don't buy a single card from this set until, at the very least, it's been out for like a few days and those prices start to come down, because so far, these are some of the most ridiculous singles prices that we've seen for a set in pre-sale in literally ever, I'm pretty sure. Just unbelievable prices. Literally, you cannot believe them. This card should not be $20, and it won't be forever, I would assume. I'm actually not even sure this card is that incredible, to be honest with you, but I'm an enchantments player, and there's going to be an enchantments, you know, one of the pre-made decks is going to be an enchantments deck. So we'll see a few different enchantments matter things on this list, and that's mostly because, you know, it's not necessarily the top 10 new cards from the set. It's the top 10 cards that like I want to play with the most. So Boon is definitely on there, and it's not the last enchantment thing that we'll see. I think that it is not the weakest card in that new enchantments deck or anything, but it's definitely the strongest of the weakest. That said, if it sits on the table for a turn or two, or you get like one wombo turn where you just play a bunch of enchantments, then suddenly you probably win the game. There's a lot of like really over the top stuff in this set like that, especially among the new cards. And I think Boon counts as part of that category. It's a sweet card. But let's move on to number 9, which you could stick me on this. This is technically another Enchantments Matters card, and it's probably going to be in the Abzan Enchantments Precon. I don't see any world in which it isn't, but I think this stretches far beyond just your typical kind of almost boring at this point Enchantments Matters card and becomes a really neat Sagas commander. Let's take a look at Narcy Fable Singer. Is she the one that sings like the song Vorthos, or like which song, Dev? I think everyone is, not just the Vorthos. You know, the song that's in like flavor text of Dominaria cards and like Mirage and Visions and Weatherlight cards. Like that song. Is she the one that wrote that? I don't know. But either way, let's look at this. This is 1 and then Abzan colors for a 3/3 legendary human bard with lifelink. Whenever you sacrifice an enchantment, draw a card. Whenever the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the saga's mana value. That's just really sweet. This is actually my favorite saga thing like of all time. This is technically our third saga commander of all time, behind one that is completely forgettable from like the last Kamigawa set. And then Tommy Bombs in the Lord of the Rings set. Tom Bombadil is a Wooburg, a 5-color Sagas commander. So it's probably more jacked in terms of like competitive value for CEDH or something. But this is the coolest Sagas commander in my mind. It is instantly my favorite like Sagas commander. I do love the color combinations on it. You can do a lot of wacky Saga stuff in Abzan. But even if you're only getting, you know, 2 life and then 2 damage or 2 loss of life to your opponents whenever a 2-mana saga goes to the graveyard, that ain't too shabby. And obviously there are 4 and 5 mana sagas out there to mess around with and get just huge gains off of this. I love the draw a card mode on it too. It's just a really, really neat card. And Tom Bombadil and cards like that, really just Tom Bombadil, are like obviously obscenely powerful, and you can do broken stuff with them, and you can play all the different colors of sagas, and again, it's probably just better, but all things considered, I think this is cooler, and that goes a long way with me. Also, like, for what it's worth, and I think it's worth a lot, how beautiful is the art? How awesome is it going to look in foil, right? So the borderless is probably going to look gorgeous too, and apparently there's a borderless in like every pack in this set, so sweet looking card. But let's move on to Teo at number 8. I kind of didn't expect this when I was putting this list together, but yeah, I think I like Teo this much. I really do. Teo, geometric tactician. Every time I read him, I think it says generic tactician at first, but no, it's geometric tactician. He costs 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. When he enters the battlefield, you get a 0/4 white wall creature token with defender and flying, so he just automatically protects himself. That's neat. His +1, you and target opponent each draw a card. For -2, you choose, I love this, for -2, you choose left or right. Until your next turn, each player may attack only the nearest opponent in the last chosen direction, and planeswalkers controlled by that opponent. So old school MTG multiplayer rules when you -2 him, which is like the whole thing that lands him on this list. If you make a game of Commander a little bit more old school in any way, shape, or form or fashion, I'm probably going to be into you a little bit. This is how we used to have to do it back in the day. Can you imagine? Every single turn was like this. There's a lot of politics on this card. Again, I love that it goes ahead and protects itself without having to spend any loyalty or, use up your ability to use a loyalty ability. That's pretty cool. Again, the politics on you and target opponent each draw a card is pretty awesome. And even the politics on the -2 is sweet too. So just a cool little thing. I like this a lot. I like the design on it, even though it's like $30. Is that correct? It's in here somewhere. Yes, $30 for this. There's no world in which this should cost $30. As a matter of fact, I think that Narcy as well. Yeah, Narcy, the last card we looked at, $30. Again, wait for these sets to come out before you buy any of these singles, because there's no world in which this card should be more than like $3, right? But once it gets there, I think it might be worth taking a look at. It's a cool card. But let's move on to number 7, which is Skittering Cicada. Honestly, nightmares. We've got a lot of cicadas down here in central Georgia this part of the year, and like every time you step outside at night, they instantly try to swarm you, and they're giant freaking bugs, and it's just so scary. This cicada actually looks like I could get along with it, right? This is 3 mana, just 3 of any color, for a 2/2 insect with flash. You may cast colorless spells as though they had flash. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, until end of turn, Cicada gains trample and gets +X/+X, where X is that spell's mana value. So a little bit like the legendary, Urza's Battle Thopter or whatever we just saw in I think it was the Brothers' War, but don't quote me. It's a lot like that card actually, but I think that it's cool to have some redundancy with that card in those Commander decks, right? Like this can make you, or allow you to play artifacts, obviously, with flash, and that's so sweet. And again, some redundancy on that is really, really nice. But it's not just artifacts. There's an Eldrazi deck, a precon that's coming out because they want to make all the money, and they will, because that's you can sell that thing. And again, they will. But this is very obviously going to be included in that deck, and it's awesome in the Eldrazi piles, right? But just again, the ability to play this in a bunch of different stuff and just cast, either mana rocks, like all the way down here at 1 and 2 mana, all the way up to stuff at like 6 mana on one of your opponent's turns is just like game breaking. I like this thing an awful lot. It's $15 right now. It won't be $15 forever. Keep an eye on it. When it goes down, it's probably worth scooping up. Honestly, especially, I should make this point one more time and then maybe not talk so much about how ridiculous these prices are. But again, this isn't a precon, and this isn't the Eldrazi precon, so it's gonna sell. This card's gonna get opened over and over and over and over. This is gonna be a lot. There'll be a lot of copies of this in the wild at some point. So again, wait for it to go down, because it will, because that Eldrazi deck is going to sell. If none of these other decks do, I imagine the Eldrazi one will. So there's going to be a glut of these in the world. Just keep that in mind. But let's move on to Onaki Oathkeeper. There's also a Planeswalker precon deck, and amazingly, some of the cards in that deck look great. We've already looked at Teo, right? There's a mono blue Planeswalker that looks really sweet in that deck. There's obviously a Commodore Duff, I think it's called, and his ability to draw cards equal to the number of Planeswalkers you have, that looks pretty strong. Really cool stuff in that deck. But my favorite card in that deck, I think, Probably a Naki Oathkeeper. This is 2 mana. It's 1 and a white for a 0/4 Ogre Spirit. Creatures can't attack creatures can't attack planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each creature they control that's attacking a planeswalker you control. You can also pay 4, 2 white, and then exile it from your graveyard to return a planeswalker from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's 2 really, really good modes. A sort of pseudo-propaganda on a non-boltable body. Really, really sweet if you're playing that Planeswalker deck. Obviously, this is really cheap to cast, so you can go ahead and set up with it before you start playing all your Planeswalkers and stuff. I like that. The Planeswalker deck needs stuff to do early in the game. It's a great choice. And then when it dies, which it almost inevitably will get hit by removal, then it's got the ability to, for a relatively decent amount of mana in Commander, right? I mean, 6 mana is achievable, much more so in Commander than a lot of other formats. And suddenly, it could just like trade itself with a planeswalker and just throw the planeswalker onto the battlefield. That seems like a really, really good ability too. So really like this. Also note that even though you can't like activate planeswalker loyalty abilities on other people's turns, it's at least noteworthy that you can do this ability on other people's turns. It's not at sorcery speed. So also pretty sweet. Just a lot of really cool stuff about this card. I'm glad it exists. And I actually think it's a decent price. If I'm not mistaken, it's like $10 or something. Yeah, it's like $10 for this card, and that ain't actually too bad in terms of what some of the other prices are in this set. But if it's $10 now, that probably means it goes down to $1 in like a month. So again, this is one you want to keep an eye on. I think this card is pretty strong. It's funny, I've come a long way. About a month ago when I did a Commander video where I looked at all the like top EDH rec Commanders and stuff like that over the last couple of years, I made a couple of comments that like planeswalkers aren't really that heavily played in Commander because everyone can attack into them more so than like in a 2-player game. And I had a few people in the comments say that Atraxa is the #1 most used commander over the last 2 years, and a lot of Atraxa builds play planeswalkers. So planeswalkers are already a thing in Commander pretty objectively, and I kind of missed that. So even if you're not playing the precon, right, then I imagine that those Atraxa decks probably want this too because it's in the color combination. So just a sweet little card. Probably pick up a copy when it calms down a little bit. But let's move on to number 5, halfway down the list. Let's look at Enixthia, Hand of Erebos. If I'm not mistaken, this is the commander for the Abzan, precon for enchantments. The Abzan precon for enchantments. Playing Magic for 30 years and I still don't know the glossary, but one way or the other. Enixthia is really neat. It does cost 5 mana, but big whoop. It's 2 in Abzan colors for a 4/4 legendary enchantment creature that's also a demigod and has menace. Other enchantment creatures you control also have menace. Whenever Enixthia enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 1 target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black zombie creature in addition to its other types. For some reason, the first 2 times I read this, I was like, wait, what do you do? But all you really need to know about this is that when it ETBs or attacks, you can grab something from your graveyard and create a copy of it that's a 3/3, right? That's pretty good. There's a lot of enchantments. Some of them that cost a buttload of mana that you can just throw into your graveyard. Just milkshake them in there, right? Find a way to bring those boys to the yard somehow. And then when Enixthia enters the battlefield, you can get like an Omniscience. I guess you can't do that because it's not in her color combination. But in some decks, if Enixthia is in the 99, I guess you could do that. But one way or the other, you could get like 7 mana plus enchantments out of your yard with this and make them 3/3s for what that's worth. And it might be worth a little bit of value. So cool. Also the fact that like all your enchantment creatures have menace. When you exile stuff out of your graveyard, make copies of your enchantments, those are enchantment creatures as well, so they have menace. Just a lot of cool stuff about this card, and I feel like we have plenty of great, Selesnya enchantment commanders. We have a couple of good, especially one very good Bant enchantment commander. And I know that to the best of my knowledge, there's at least one decent Abzan enchantment commander, but now I think this one is like the default Abzan enchantments commander, and it's a really sweet one too. It helps that she looks awesome, by the way. She looks very, very cool and is just an awesome card. So kind of can't wait to mess around with this, and I'm pretty sure it's relatively expensive at the moment. Yeah, it's $25 at the moment, but that again should come down. It shouldn't be too hard to build a deck around this in terms of budget before too long. But let's look at number 4. You already see what it is. It's Sliver Gravemother. Yeah, all the way down here at number 4. I imagine this is some people's like number 1 new card in the set, but there's actually slivers that I'm more excited to play, which again, remember, is the metric here, than this one. But Sliver Gravemother is a Wooburg legendary sliver, so Good commander, right? It's a 6/6. The legend rule doesn't apply to slivers you control. Each sliver creature card in your graveyard has Encore X, where Encore, or X, excuse me, is its mana value. This also has Encore 5. That's equal to its mana value. Look at that. Exile this card from your graveyard. For each opponent, create a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn if able. They gain haste, sacrifice in the beginning of the next end step. You can only do it as a sorcery. So kind of an unearthy thing, but it creates a copy for each opponent and attacks them. That's pretty crazy. that's pretty good, especially considering, the legend rule doesn't apply. So when you do Encore this, it's just a bunch of 6/6 slivers attacking your opponents. If you have extra mana, you can Encore other stuff. So really big sort of finisher card for slivers that's good late in the game as a, OTK or whatever, but a one-turn kill, but is even good sort of in the mid-game when you do get to the original 5 mana to cast it. Still decent there. If you untap with it and play and you can Encore a sliver or two, you're probably doing some good stuff. So not to mention that if you do Encore a sliver, that sliver is going to, bestow a benefit onto all of your other slivers, including this one. So a lot of cool stuff going on. Probably contribute to those OTKs late in the game because Sliver Gravemother and all your other slivers are going to have like 7 abilities apiece if you can Encore enough stuff, So just a sweet little piece here. And I will acknowledge that this is a crazy good card. It doesn't justify the price tag, though. I think this is the most expensive card we're going to look at today. So it's like $75. Just nuts. However, of all the cards we look at today, I think this is probably the most capable of maintaining that price tag. Probably come down a good bit, don't get me wrong, but I don't see this card getting below like $40 realistically anytime soon. So 75. It's so many American dollars, but it's even more in some currencies and some other currencies, but it could potentially be worth it if you're into slivers decks. And again, just like the Eldrazi deck, there's a sliver precon. I'm pretty sure this is the commander for, so hopefully just because of that it goes down, because a lot of people are going to buy this deck. People either love or hate slivers, but more people love them, especially old school players that you might want to be enticing back to the game. They're going to buy the crap out of this sliver deck, so just remember that. Maybe it'll go down as a factor of that, but it will remain a very popular card and probably be relatively tough to get your hands on. I don't know what the basement is on this card, but it's probably not too low. But we'll move on. I've talked again too much about price to Zuladoc Void Gorger. How much are you right now? $50 for a Zuladoc. That's just, come on, man. But this again is, I believe, the precon commander for the Eldrazi deck. It's a sweet card. It costs 5 and a colorless, so 6 mana no matter what, and one of them has to be a colorless mana produced by a waste or some other colorless mana producing source. Legendary creature, Eldrazi, it's a 7/4. Colorless spells you cast from your hand, that kind of sucks, with mana value 7 or greater, have Cascade. When you cast one, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exiled cards on the bottom of your library in a random order, and then do that again, in case you haven't been exposed to Cascade, and I imagine like 80% of you or more have. This is an unbelievably stupid ability. Cascade is so freaking good, and obviously if you're casting something with mana value 7 or greater, then there's no limit to the amount of stuff you can cascade into. Like, obviously Eldrazi decks will have stuff like that's 8, 9, 10 mana from 11 from time to time, right? So you can't hit that stuff, but you can hit almost every spell in your deck with these cascades, and you do it twice. So like hit creature removal spell, that seems very dumb. So this does look like a good card. And to be honest, in terms of like how much Eldrazi usually costs to cast, this ain't that bad. 6 mana, sure. I got Soul Rings. Why not? So pretty sweet little guy. And he is like the premier Eldrazi commander from here on in, I think. I'm pretty sure. But the reason he's $50, he's probably the second or third most expensive card in the set, and that's because people eat stuff like this up for good reason. It's awesome. But let's move on to number 2. Wow, we're already there. Number 2 is actually 2 cards, because I can't help myself. I have to do that at least once. I guess count them as honorable mention or something. But one is Hatchery Sliver. Like I said, there are slivers on this list that are, I think, slightly better or at least more exciting to me subjectively than Sliver Gravemother. Gravemother looks cool, but it's just a big, win the game in the late game, 1-turn kill to do the stupid stuff. It's one of those, like, over the top. They're introducing too many of those to Commander for my taste, and I don't even play Commander, but I'd really like I like longer methodical games if I'm going to play a format like Commander, but they keep releasing all these ridiculous bombs to just win the game on turn 7, and I feel like Sliver Grave Mother is like close to one of those, you know, but I like stuff like this. Hatchery Sliver is 1 and a green for a 2/2 Sliver with Replicate 1 and a green. When you cast it, you can copy it for each time you paid the Replicate cost. And of course, each Sliver spell you cast now has Replicate as well, the Replicate cost equal to its mana cost. That just seems unbelievable to me. It's like broken in a way, you know, if you have enough mana and it's Commander, you know, come on, you got some mana. Then if you rip a Sliver off the top of your library, then suddenly you're casting 4 of them, 5, who knows, you know, at that point in the game, who knows. But even if you're just getting like 1 copy of each Sliver that you cast off the top deck or whatever, yes, that probably seems, it's so good, man. So good. It especially goes well with Grave Mother's text that like legendary Slivers you control, the legend rule doesn't apply. So if you cast Grave Mother, then suddenly you can just do it twice if you have 10 mana. That's a lot, but doing it twice seems okay. I guess you just get 2 6/6s, who cares? But I just wanted to point out that the legend rule thing matters with the Replicate. But just a really, really cool Sliver, man. Really cool. It's almost as cool as Lazotep Sliver. This is 4 mana, 3 and a black for a zombie Sliver. 4/4, Sliver creatures you control have Afflict 2. Whenever a creature with Afflict 2 becomes blocked, the defending player loses 2 life. Whenever a non-token Sliver you control dies, amass Slivers 2. That's, of course, put 2+1/+1 counters on an army you control. It's also a Sliver. If you don't have an army, you create a 0/0 black Sliver army creature token first, and then put the counters on that. So, just a sweet card. I hate that it costs 4 mana. That does seem a little pricey, but this could theoretically just end the game for at least one player, if not more, all at the same time. You know, this is one of those big over-the-top cards, but it can be stopped relatively easily. You know what I mean? A lot of times, even if they do block, they're going to take some damage, but they will be taking less damage. You know, if they block a Lazotep Sliver, sure, they lose 2 life, but that's 2 less than they would have lost if they didn't block it. So I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world, but I will say, especially along with the Sliver that lets you replicate stuff, you know, if you have a board full of Slivers, this probably threatens to end, again, at least one player's game the turn that you drop it. And if it's not dealt with, it'll just continue to kind of march through the battlefield, just taking people down, right? So really sweet card here. And obviously I'm mostly just talking about the Afflict text, but this is cool too. You know, it counts itself. It's not whenever another non-token Sliver you control dies. So that's actually pretty cool. It needs to die. And when it does, it's at least going to give you a 2/2, right? So a lot of cool stuff about this. And of course, if there's even more high priority Slivers for them to kill, those will also contribute to your army. So just a very cool card. One of my favorite Slivers that they printed in a really long time, especially considering they don't print Slivers very often anymore. But this and Replicant Sliver or whatever, Hatchery Sliver is what it's called, are just crazy looking cards to me. I honestly think that they're at least more exciting, if not better, than Sliver Grave Mother. Just awesome additions to your Slivers deck. But let's move on to number 1. Look, this is not the best card we'll look at today. I want to go ahead and make that super clear here. But it is my favorite card of the day, the one that I'm most excited to play with. And I'll just point out that you can't help who you love. You know, you don't choose that some of the time. They choose you. So let's move on to Undo Spirit Dancer at number 1. This is 5 mana, 4 and a white for a 3/3 core cleric. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a token that's a copy of it. Do this only once each turn. So they did, you know, eliminate some of the fun that you could be having with this card. I will say that. But even that doesn't darken my day too much. You know what I mean? I, again, am a sucker for enchantments. I've been building Sithis. One of my favorite cards of all time since I was like 11 years old is Verduran Enchantress, right? So I just, again, you cannot help what you love. I am very aware that this is 5 mana. That's so much mana. You probably have to play this on a lot of board states. And then just like kind of pray that it survives for a turn so you can untap with it. And that's probably not great. It probably isn't. But again, late in the game when you have enough mana, or you can maybe reanimate this or throw it into play somehow, cheat it out or something, and then play an enchantment, then suddenly it becomes ridiculous. It sucks you can do it only once each turn, but if you have ways to flash in enchantments, which there are plenty of ways to do, there's lots of enchantments with flash, then suddenly the value on this becomes just like untenable for anybody to actually have to play against, you know, so keep that in mind. But even if you're really only copying like 1 enchantment per turn, you can make it count, you know, copy Sigil of the Empty Throne or a million different things. Copy Boon of the Spirit Realm, the first card we looked at, and then suddenly all your creatures get like plus 50, plus 50, right? So it seems like there's an awful lot of cool stuff that you can do with this. I'm a little surprised that this card didn't exist beforehand, given the simplicity of it, but really, really sweet text box. It could cost twice as much and I would still be really interested in playing this card. This thing's awesome. And there's even more stuff for the enchantment stack that like I could have pointed out. Like I guess Composer of Spring is a card. It actually doesn't look that impressive to me. It looks like a little bit of a trap. And there's other stuff for other decks too, like Flair of Loyalties. That card looks ridiculous, but you know, I really had to keep it down to 10 cards here. And at the end of the day, I think we picked the right 10 for my tastes. Let me know about yours down there in the comments section if there's anything that I didn't bring up or whatever. And you're excited to play with, and I'm all ears, you know, just hopefully it's not like a $80 card. That's every card in the set. I think that this is even, this is $30. This 5 mana removal sponge is $30. It's gonna come down at some point in history, and hopefully it gets reprinted a few times too, because, you know, pretty easy thing to reprint, I think, in a Commander or Modern Horizons or something like that. So just a sweet little card. I didn't talk about how any of these cards might affect certain competitive environments or anything. That's because I'm mostly concerned about Commander. Those are the format. That's the format I want to play these cards in and all that. So I guess I could have added that layer, that wrinkle, but most of the cards I talked about today probably won't see a whole lot of competitive play in formats outside Commander or whatever. So as a matter of fact, I'm not even 100% sure these cards are playable in Modern. Who knows? I'm sure some of you do, and it's kind of my job to, but I hadn't paid that much attention to Commander Masters until the entire set was spoiled. So it was fun to go through and just pick out 10 cards that I was like, ooh, you know what I mean? So just let me know what you like from the set and all that. And let me know how you felt about my picks too. But aside from that, I guess we have to pick a card off the couch, don't we? Let me wheel over there real quick. See what we can do. I'm not going to look. I'm not going to look. I'm not going to look. What is this card? It's a Sigardian Savior. Let me get up on the mic. It's a Sigardian Savior, which is probably going to be reversed. Yeah, that's how webcams work. Sigardian Savior's 5 mana, 3 and 2 white for a 3/3 angel with flying. It's mythic. When it ETBs, if you cast it, return up to 2 target creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Doesn't that sound like a good card? But it never really did anything in Standard. We expected it to do something, and there are some meme decks that play it, but it really did much. But hey, we got a foil mythic that might someday be worth something in Commander. Who knows? But still, decent pull. Aside from that, I guess just watch me play some Magic on Twitch from time to time at twitch.tv/spmtgdev. Check me out on Patreon to support the content around here, and it really, really helps an awful lot. You have no idea. So check out patreon.com/spmtg. Links in the descriptions for all this stuff. And of course, one last thing, just started the second channel where we talk about the Pokemon TCG, and I might also do a little bit of Lorcana talk on that. Disney Lorcana, haven't decided yet. But I kind of want to talk about that card game, but one way or the other. We just released our first video. It is a set review for Pokemon Obsidian Flames, which comes out August the 11th. We talk about the top 10 cards, top 10 sleepers, top 5 overrated cards in the set. A lot of fun stuff in that video, and I had a lot of fun making it. So I'll leave a link in the description over to that video. I'm trying to get it to 1,000 views, and I'm trying to get the channel to 1,000 subscribers as quickly as possible. So if you help me out with that, it would mean an awful lot. It's completely free to do those things. But aside from that, I think I'm actually donezo. Here, we're like 30 minutes in. How did this take 30 minutes? I talk too much. That's what happens. But I guess I'm donezo for this onezo. So it's your turn. Hit me up in the comments section. Let me know your thoughts on this set and my picks. But I guess that's it. I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.